So we're going to try and get you out of here on time. I'm going to ask for any questions or comments. If you have a question, please keep it brief so others can get in. And if you have any comments. And we've got a second live mic. Michael Weitzman, you definitely deserve to ask the first question or make a comment. And thank you for seating this, Michael.
I'm really glad to have been able to kick off this project. It's just the kind of thing we need. It's the kind of thing I've been looking to sponsor. And I'm really pleased with the progress that I see. I mean, it's only been a few weeks, and Craig and his team has developed all these maps. They've put everything in place. We've got the CEC involved and engaging the politicians and property owners. So I'm just really glad at the progress. My question is, can you say a bit about how everything comes together? I'm an engineer. So I'm interested in what are the components that need to get built, and how do you fund that?
Craig?
Yeah, great question, Mike. So the major components are the solar, and we've got about 5 megawatts of solar siting opportunity. Let's just say we can get about half of that built. So that's about 2.5 megawatts of solar. The energy storage we're going to want to put in combination with that in order to provide the level of resilience that we're talking about is going to be somewhere around 2 megawatts, 8 megawatt hours of energy storage. And then in order to tie this all together, we have to upgrade the grid. So that's going to require help from Southern California Edison, or at least it's going to require their cooperation. And then the systems that tie it together, you call it the microgrid controller. There's lots of different names for these systems, but we like to just refer to it as monitoring communication control, because that's what these systems do. They monitor what's happening, they send signals back and forth, and then they ultimately control, you know, is your energy storage, is it charging, is it discharging, where are all those switches set, are you isolating from the grid, are you kind of reestablishing connection to the larger grid, et cetera. Mike, to answer your question, I think the solar is going to cost somewhere around, you know, 5 to 7 million, depending on exactly how much we are able to get down. The energy storage is probably going to cost right around $6 million, and then the monitoring communication control is going to cost about $2 million. If you add up those numbers, it comes out to about $15 million. That's the total cost. Uncle Sam, through tax credits, going to pay for tax credits and other tax benefits, going to pay for about a third of it, so you're down to about $10 million. And then the economic value of the energy and the demand charge management, some other value streams, that's going to pay for the majority of that, but there's probably going to be a gap of a couple of $1 million that's going to have to come from either foundations or some generous donors or through the California Energy Commission or some other type of government grant, because right now, unfortunately, resilience is not a quantifiable element. There's not some established valuation for resilience. So that piece of it is going to have a little bit of a gap, and we're going to have to come up probably with a couple of $1 million to pay for that gap, that resilience gap. But basically, total spend is about $15 million. About a third of that comes back almost immediately through tax benefits, and then the other 2/3, or most of the other 2/3, gets paid for through economic value of the energy, et cetera. And there probably will be a little bit of an economic gap. So I don't know, I hopefully answer your question.
Yeah. And by the way, we didn't talk about houses tonight. Obviously, all the houses in Montecito and elsewhere in Santa Barbara can all be islanded or interconnected as well. To island, which is what my house is, so my house never loses energy no matter what happens on the grid. It's solar with a combination of battery storage with other backup technologies. So if anybody wants to see that, by the way, feel free to contact the Academy, and I'll be happy to show you how that works, because I'll show you what a controller looks like in a more miniature version of what he's talking about on a microgrid version. And so don't anyone here tonight think that because you don't live on top of the Vaughns that you can't participate. There'll be numerous ways to participate, whether it's in your own house or in the way we put together the ultimate financing package for this project. Next question or comment?
I've been asking you for years about hydrogen, and
Thank you, Andy.
I'm very frustrated because it seems like there's this incredible opportunity to both use hydrogen as a storage mechanism, and nobody's talking about transportation. So with the Mirai and all the new fuel cell cars and the lack of hydrogen filling stations that can make this whole country viable. So hydrogen is one question, but the real other question is, what's the possibility of expanding the desal plant and powering that with solar so we can have water and energy?
On the hydrogen, I'll take that one. The hydrogen question, yes, in the numbers he just gave you, you're probably talking about flow batteries and certain other conventional battery technologies. The future clearly is I drive a hydrogen vehicle, as you know, Andy. And having a single station here has its limitations, but it also brings hydrogen to our community. For those of you who are interested in how hydrogen plays a long-term role in energy independence, particularly the California Moonshot, and how it could play a role here as well using fuel cells, ask us for that video. It's only 20 minutes long, the TED Talk I gave in Sacramento on the California Moonshot, and it goes into the details of how hydrogen can be used. If we get off on that tonight, however, I'm concerned, as much as I love hydrogen, and some of you know 13 years ago I wrote a book with a major chapter on it. I've written a number of papers on it. So I'd love to talk about it, but I want to keep this tonight focused on the microgrid, and you can see from the way that what Craig does, why we're so happy to have him as a partner, because he's breaking it down to these little bite-sized nuggets, and even though 2 million might sound like a lot, I don't think that's a lot to build a resilient energy system for Montecito. So we want to focus on that tonight, but Andy, let's talk again afterwards. Anyone else out there with a question or a comment? Mike. Jerry.
Craig, hi. I want to talk about Edison a little bit, both on the positive side and the negative side. From past experience, we understood that they've been, and also with installers of renewable energy, that they've been resistant in terms of providing any economical distribution between local solar energy systems. And here you're talking about tying this all together. So one, I understand you're going to be down with them. How do we overcome this? And number two, there was a point where we at the Academy tried to get Edison to put one of its distributed renewable projects, pilot projects here in Santa Barbara, and the understanding was that they could spread the costs of that over all of their 5 million customers. Is that a conceivable scenario for bridging the gap in terms of the financing here?
Yeah, great question, Jerry. Edison is really afraid of this brave new energy world, and so are all the other big utilities, by the way, so Edison's not alone in this. The challenges for getting Edison and other big utilities to kind of understand how they're going to participate in this brave new world, how they can possibly make the same kind of money by opening up and doing creative things on their distribution grids that they currently, and that will avoid a tremendous amount of investment in their transmission grids, which is great for us as ratepayers because the transmission grid is hugely expensive. But because it's expensive for us, it means they make a lot of money off of it. And so, they're very nervous about this distributed energy resources world, and that's the biggest barrier that we have to deal with. So the way to help them understand how to move into this brave new world and, feel like they have a future in it, is to show them that there are significant investment opportunities for the utilities to invest in their distribution grids, potentially to be one of the investors that is, investing in the solar and the energy storage and all these other assets that will get deployed out there. I don't know if I'm sure not everybody's familiar with how the utilities make money in California, but their primary driver for profitability is by making capital investments, meaning they have to invest in assets. That's how they drive their profits. That's a primary driver of profits for investor-owned utilities in California. So we've got to show them how they can make those investments and overcome a lot of that fear they have. One of the challenges working with the utilities is that when we'll be in there, we'll be talking with director level, maybe a VP or so here and there. But in order to move forward and for Edison to agree to move forward with this, it is going to be a board level decision. So if you're talking with a director, that director is going to bubble up to a VP, that VP is going to bubble up to a senior VP, right? And then you're going to get to the board level. So it's a challenge, but if we don't have the conversations, then we know what the answer is going to be, right? It's going to be a no. If we want to get to a yes, we've got to get this conversation started, and we got to show them how that future can pan out for them. And I will just say, we got tremendous assets right here. Charles and Jen, I mean, it's just was so wonderful to hear everything they had to say, and hopefully there's some questions going in their direction too.
Let me just add, Jerry, on the issue of intent, if the people of Montecito didn't learn through the Thomas fire and debris flows a lesson of resilience, then the community's in worse shape than I want to believe. I mean, you only had to be evacuated, you only had to go without power, without cable, without gas, without water, with the failure of our water system, to know that resilience of our infrastructure is the answer to making our community habitable on a sustained and sustainable basis for the future.
I don't want to point out anybody in the rooms by name, but there are people here who know something about social impact investing bonds, and we will be looking towards putting some of those possibilities together for the community. And I believe what you'll find is that there's a number of ways the financing can occur, and we should be getting as much help as possible from every aspect. We got time for at least one more before I, please.
I'm just curious about, are there model grids around the country that have been very successful? Have they been implemented, and what can we learn from them?
The best one in California he's building right now.
You guys are missing a great opportunity to hear more from Jen, because she is a tremendous asset that y'all get the benefit from. So hopefully we get time for one more question. So there's a great project in San Diego gas and electric territory called the Borrego Springs Community Microgrid. That's the best example we have in California. Probably the best example we have around the country is the Long Island Community Microgrid, and that's a project that the Clean Coalition did in partnership with the utilities that serve all of Long Island, which is the Long Island Power Authority, it's a municipal utility, and PSEG Long Island, which is an investor-owned utility that they hired to operate the grid for them. You have to kind of deal with both the utilities out there. That brought in 15 megawatts of solar, 10 megawatts, 40 megawatt hours of energy storage, so a ton of these distributed energy resources, and it set the stage for 90 megawatts of wind, of offshore wind. That's the first offshore wind project in the United States. It's going to be off the coast of Long Island, and it's going to come and interconnect into the substation that we basically set up through the Long Island Community Microgrid project. We weren't planning for that. That was just a bonus gravy on top. So instead of just 15 megawatts of wind, 15 megawatts of solar, we got 15 megawatts of solar plus 90 megawatts of wind, and that was all enabled from a community microgrid project.
One more question back here.
Hi.
Before you do, quick. So you left out Hunter's Point.
Oh, yeah.
So, no, but you're building, it's in process. Hunter Point is, Clean Coalition's up in San Francisco, and UCSD, University of California, San Diego, which is a freestanding microgrid and has been very successful 2 or 3 years.
We've been very interested in the solar and independence and personal resilience, and we've been looking at Tesla and what they've got to offer, and I'm very excited about what's going on right now with this here and today. And Charles, you brought up one thing about rebuilding in the creeks. I was wondering if the creeks, the way they broke their banks, they used to be 50 feet wide, now they're 450 feet wide. Is the outline of the creek now 450 feet wide, is that an anomaly? Is that going to be considered an anomaly? Or is that the new creek bank that you're going to have to build 50 feet away from in order to comply with planning and safety?
I would have to tell you that the answer to that question, which is an important question, isn't yet known. The county is deliberating very cautiously as the director of the Office of Emergency Services said, we have a constitution in the country that protects people's rights and so on. But it's a complex question. I think the bottom line is that if a resilient but safe structure can be built, it ought to be built, but we have to recognize that there are definitely going to be new areas, new places that are simply not buildable for single-family homes. Now, what we do with them is another issue, and as I said, you know, there's been a lot of talk in Washington and California about shovel-ready projects and infrastructure. Well, Mother Nature did the digging. It's now a question of what we do with the hole that we're left to confront. And I think we all need to have input to that, and through our public officials and otherwise, and be vigilant about it so that the decision that's made as to what goes in those holes is the best decision for our community and for the future of our community.
Yeah, I just have two quick follow-ups. One is on the kind of floodplain mapping exercise. So as Charles alluded to, we don't yet know the answer to that. We're about 90 days out, probably, from knowing the answer to that. There's two very large-scale mapping exercises going on right now. The recent debris flow has completely reshaped the topography of the Montecito, Summerlin, Carpinteria area. And so there's two different kind of entities on the ground doing some mapping right now. One is FEMA. They're redrawing the floodplains. People that were not anywhere near the boundaries of a creek bed now have a creek flowing through the middle of their property and vice versa. So that's going on through FEMA, and then the county also has a consultant team that's out essentially redrawing property lines. Resetting stakes in the ground for defining where the parcel lines are because they've been buried and covered up, and creeks are a big piece of why that has changed. So I don't think we will know that for a little bit now. And then the second thing I wanted to follow up on was something that Craig said regarding kind of how do we get the buy-in from Southern California Edison, kind of the business model side of things. So as he alluded to, their profit-making machine is their capital assets. Most people don't realize that not many of the investor-owned utilities actually own many power plants, any generating facilities anymore. They've had to sell most of those off. They actually purchase most of the power that they sell to all of us as end-use customers. So where they really have the capital assets is in their delivery infrastructure, the power lines, the substations, everything that comes along with it. So if there's an argument to be made that their role is to help build out the connectors between the distributed energy sources, they can make about a 10% return on that. There's a lot of things that have to get approved and loops to jump through, and there's kind of equity considerations to keep in mind for their entire service area, but there is a potential benefit to them.
Thank you. And so we're going to, because it's time, we're going to wrap up. But if anybody wants to keep this conversation going, just write info@worldbusiness.org. Like I said, we can send you that 20-minute video. We can also send you a copy of this evening's discussion so that you can share it with others, so they can see what we're all thinking about. I want to also thank a couple people. I want to mention, again, Bob Perry, who's been mapping the county for the last 3 years, and that's where some of these slides came from. And without that effort, and ones that you haven't seen that you'll see in other presentations, we wouldn't have been able to make so much progress so quickly. I want to thank Matt Renner, who was the executive director for 4 years of the Academy, and who was willing to be this incredible bridge so we could partner up even more deeply with Clean Coalition. I want to thank Christy, and I want to thank Angelin, because without them, this meeting wouldn't have happened tonight. So thank you both very much. We are going to do, next month, we're going to do, the meeting is going to be on retail. Montecito, Coast Village Road, and Santa Barbara. The crisis in retail, a lot of people think it's because of homeless. Some people think it's because the landlords charge too much. Some people think it's because the electricity doesn't work well. Some people think it's because we haven't got a good planning program in place. That's a conversation we need to have if we're going to think globally and act locally. So watch for an email to tell you when that's going to come up. We had a date picked, Christy, and the reason I'm not announcing it is because Craig is asking us if we can juggle it, because he'd like to come to that. So we're going to go back to getting the date, and please watch for it in your emails. And if they're, Judy, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you, everybody, for coming tonight, and thank you to our host, the El Encanto.
I actually was going to tell you the date and time, but now I'm not. That was why I came up, just to remind you. But it will be sometime, very soon, about a month from now. Watch for our email. Stay connected. We're really working hard on making this community strong. and we're really needing every one of you. And I thank each person who spoke on the panel. I thank you, Gina, for coming, and I think that our resilience starts from within and will work outside of us. Come together, be kind to one another, and enjoy this beautiful place that we've been given. I know that all of us feel that way, but we have to remember that every day. So we look forward to seeing you again next month, and have a lovely evening.